Chosen one, listen carefully, because what you went through was never a coincidence. They didn't come for you once, and they didn't try for a short season. They watched you for years. They studied your weaknesses, whispered behind your back, plotted in silence, and returned again and again, convinced that time would eventually break you. They thought persistence would guarantee your downfall. But here you are, still standing, still guided, still protected by Allah. This message is for the one who survived long-term attacks that were meant to exhaust your faith, shatter your identity, and erase your future. Tonight, you will finally understand why every attempt failed, why their plans collapsed one by one, and why Allah allowed the battle to last so long. Because when Allah chooses someone, no amount of hatred, envy, or darkness can override His decree. Chosen one, understand this with absolute clarity. No one wages war for years against something small, meaningless, or powerless. And the reason they kept attacking you again and again, through different seasons, different people, different tactics, and different disguises, is because your destiny carried a weight that disturbed their souls long before you even understood it yourself. Because Allah placed something inside you that exposed false authority, threatened fragile egos, and revealed truth without you needing to speak. And when people sense that your presence alone challenges what they built on lies, shortcuts, or oppression, they do not confront it directly at first. They study it, they watch, they test, and then they begin the long campaign of pressure meant to wear you down slowly, hoping time would succeed where strength could not. But what they never understood is that Allah assigns long trials only to those whose future impact is equally long-lasting. And while they believed they were attacking you, Allah was quietly fortifying you, teaching you patience through repetition, discipline through endurance, and spiritual authority through restraint. Because every year you survived what was designed to break, you became proof that your destiny was not fragile, not accidental, and not negotiable. And this is why the attacks evolved. Instead of stopping when lies failed, they tried isolation. When isolation failed, they tried character assassination. When that failed, they tried provoking reactions. And when even that failed, they resorted to silent envy and internal collapse, all while Allah allowed the pressure to continue just long enough to remove every trace of dependence on people from your heart, so that when your elevation arrives, you will not confuse popularity with purpose, nor applause with approval, because your destiny was never about comfort, it was about responsibility. And the ones attacking you sensed that if you ever fully stepped into what Allah prepared for you, their influence would diminish, their masks would slip, and their control would weaken. So they fought not because they were brave, but because they were terrified of what Allah was building in you through every sleepless night, every unanswered question, every moment you chose sabr over revenge, and tawakkul over despair. And now that you are still standing after years of resistance, understand this final truth. The length of the battle was never a sign that you were losing. It was evidence that your destiny is so significant that darkness needed time, numbers, and persistence, yet still failed miserably against the decree of Allah. Chosen one, understand this deeply. What looked like confidence, dominance, or authority on the surface was in reality a trembling fear hidden beneath repetition, because truly strong people do not obsess, monitor, or return endlessly to the same target, but those who are afraid cannot let go. And the reason they kept coming back to attack you, provoke you, test you, and watch you for years was not because they believed in their own power, but because they did not believe they could survive the future in which you fully step into what Allah prepared for you. And fear has a way of masquerading as aggression, because when people are terrified of exposure, replacement, or irrelevance, They attempt control instead of self-correction, and every time they failed to shake you, their fear intensified, pushing them to try again with more urgency, less wisdom, and weaker restraint, while you, guided by Allah, were learning to remain composed, anchored, and observant, understanding that fear makes people predictable and desperation makes them reckless. And Allah allowed their fear to reveal itself through inconsistency, contradictions, and emotional outbursts, because fear cannot maintain discipline for long. And while they thought their persistence would eventually overwhelm you, Allah was using it to expose them, strip away their credibility, and show that real strength is quiet, patient, and rooted in trust in Him, not in intimidation, manipulation, or repeated attacks. And this is why their energy drained faster than yours, because fear consumes the one who carries it, while tawakkul replenishes the one who trusts. And by the time they realized their persistence was not breaking you but refining you, they were already trapped by their own obsession, unable to stop, unable to win, and unable to hide the truth any longer, that what drove them was never strength, strategy, or superiority, but the deep, unsettling fear that Allah placed something within you that they could never control, imitate, or destroy. Chosen one, what you may not have realized while the battle dragged on year after year is that Allah was not allowing time to work against you, He was weaponizing it for you, because while you felt the weight of waiting, the uncertainty, and the emotional toll of prolonged opposition, Allah was quietly shifting the balance in ways the eye could not see, renewing your patience, deepening your reliance on Him, and strengthening your inner foundation layer by layer, while those who attacked you were operating from ego, envy, and fear, energies that burn fast and collapse under their own weight. And every attempt they repeated required more effort, more lies, more justification, and more emotional investment, while you learn to conserve your words, your reactions, and your energy, understanding that sabr is not passive but strategic. And over time, Allah trained your soul to remain steady under pressure, to think clearly while others panicked, and to trust His timing even when results were delayed. And this is why they became visibly tired, inconsistent, and careless as time passed, because obsession cannot be sustained indefinitely, and Allah allows repetition to drain the attacker while fortifying the one who remains sincere. And by the time the final outcomes begin to unfold, the ones who once felt powerful are spiritually depleted, mentally scattered, and internally collapsing, while you stand grounded, composed, and prepared for what comes next, realizing that time never weakened you. It purified you, disciplined you, and aligned you with a strength that does not come from urgency, noise, or force, but from a quiet certainty that Allah never allows endurance without elevation, and never allows long trials unless He intends long-term impact through the one who endured them. Chosen one, what they never anticipated and what ultimately dismantled everything they built against you was your silence. Because in a world addicted to reaction, explanation, and emotional exposure, your restraint became unnatural, unsettling, and terrifying to those who depended on chaos to survive, as they expected you to defend yourself publicly, to argue your truth, to expose what you knew, and to lower yourself into the same emotional battlefield where they felt most powerful. But instead you chose silence, rooted in trust in Allah, and that decision quietly shifted the entire war, because manipulators require noise to function. They need words to twist, emotions to exploit, and reactions to redirect blame. And when you denied them access to your voice, you also denied them access to control, leaving their accusations unsupported, their narratives unstable, and their strategies incomplete. And Allah, seeing your restraint, took over the defense Himself, fulfilling his promise that he is the best of protectors. Because when a servant steps back for his sake, Allah steps forward with authority no human can compete with. And while they spoke endlessly behind your back, repeated the same stories to different audiences, exaggerated details, and tried to provoke you into breaking your composure, your silence remained consistent, dignified, and unwavering, creating a contrast so sharp that even observers who did not know the full truth could sense where integrity lived, and over time their words began colliding with each other. Contradictions surfaced, timelines didn't match, intentions were exposed, and what once sounded convincing began to feel forced, emotional, and desperate, while your quiet presence remained unchanged, stable, and unbothered. And Allah allowed this imbalance to grow slowly, because truth does not need urgency, but falsehood always does, and every moment you stayed silent was not a moment of loss, but a moment of divine record, a moment where Allah weighed your patience, documented your dignity, and preserved your honor, while every careless word they spoke without justice became evidence against them. And this is why their plans didn't simply fail, they imploded, because silence starved their manipulation, removed their leverage, and forced them to face the reality that they could not win a battle where the other side refused to fight with ego. And what they misunderstood most is that your silence was not submission to them, it was submission to Allah. Because when you choose silence for His sake, He responds with outcomes, reversals, and exposure that no explanation could ever achieve, and in the end, you were not required to clarify, defend, or confront, because Allah allowed their own actions, emotional instability, and eventual collapse to speak louder than any response you could have given, proving once again that when Allah shields His chosen ones, He does not always raise their voice. He elevates their position, preserves their peace, and lets silence become the sharpest blade against falsehood. Chosen one, understand this truth with certainty. Allah may allow oppression to continue for a time, but He never allows it to go unnoticed, undocumented, or unanswered, because prolonged injustice does not signal divine neglect, it signals divine preparation. And when attacks stretch across years, when harm becomes repetitive, intentional, and unapologetic, Allah does not respond with haste. He responds with precision, because He allows the oppressor to exhaust every excuse, remove every mask, and cross every boundary until there is no doubt left about the injustice being committed. And during that time, you may have wondered why relief felt delayed, why help seemed invisible, and why silence appeared to surround your pain. But what was truly happening is that Allah was building a case so complete that when intervention arrived, it would be undeniable, irreversible, and perfectly timed, because Allah does not interrupt oppression prematurely when it still has the ability to expose itself, and long-term wrongdoing always reveals patterns, intentions, and hearts. And this is why the ones who harmed you grew bolder, more careless, and more entitled over time, mistaking divine patience for permission, not realizing that Allah's forbearance is not weakness, it is restraint before decisive action. And while they continued, Allah was measuring every word, every manipulation, every lie, every misuse of power, and every moment they chose cruelty over conscience, while at the same time strengthening you internally, detaching you from outcomes and anchoring your trust in Him alone, so that when intervention finally came, you would not confuse it with coincidence or luck, but recognize it as divine justice, arriving exactly when it could no longer be denied. And when Allah intervenes after long-term oppression, He does not merely stop the harm, He dismantles the structure that allowed it to exist, removing influence, exposing alliances, severing protection, and collapsing systems that once seemed untouchable. often in ways that shock even the oppressors themselves, because Allah intervenes at the root, not the surface. And this is why the shift feels sudden to them but deeply familiar to you, because your heart sensed it long before your eyes saw it. And what makes Allah's intervention so precise is that it rarely requires you to act, because justice carried out by Allah does not need your participation, your anger, or your revenge. It unfolds through consequences, reversals, losses, and exposure that align perfectly with what was done in secret. And the same people who once felt untouchable begin to lose clarity, stability, and favor. While doors open for you without explanation, pressure lifts without warning, and peace replaces the weight you carried for so long. And this precision is intentional, because Allah wants both sides to understand the source of the outcome, so there is no confusion about who defended you. And this is why long-term oppression is dangerous for the oppressor, because the longer it continues, the more complete the reckoning becomes. And Allah allowed the duration not to break you, but to justify the magnitude of what followed, proving that patience does not delay justice, it amplifies it. And endurance does not go unnoticed. It summons intervention so exact that it leaves no room for denial, teaching you once and for all that when Allah steps in after prolonged dhulm, He does so not with noise or chaos, but with a precision that restores balance, honors patience, and reminds the world that no injustice, no matter how long it lasts, ever escapes His perfect control. Chosen one, understand this with deep spiritual clarity. The true moment their defeat became inevitable was not when their plans failed publicly, not when their lies were exposed, and not when circumstances turned against them, but the silent, unseen moment you chose Allah over your ego, because every battle has a spiritual axis, and once that axis shifts, the outcome is no longer negotiable. And when you resisted the urge to defend yourself with arrogance, retaliate with harm, expose them prematurely, or satisfy your wounded pride, you unknowingly stepped out of the battlefield of human ego and into the domain of divine authority, where outcomes are no longer decided by strategy, numbers, or force, but by sincerity, patience, and trust in Allah's decree. And this choice was not easy, because ego whispers that silence is weakness, that restraint is loss, and that vengeance is justice. Yet you chose the harder path, the path of submission, the path where you said, Allah is sufficient for me, even while your heart was heavy, misunderstood, and tested beyond comfort. And this decision immediately altered the balance of power, because as long as you were emotionally invested in proving yourself, defending your name, or winning the argument, they still had access to you. But the moment you detached your worth from their perception and anchored it solely in Allah's approval, their influence collapsed, because ego is the doorway through which manipulation enters, and once that doorway was closed, their tactics lost effectiveness, their provocations lost direction, and their obsession lost purpose, while Allah, seeing your sincerity, took over the battle entirely, because Allah does not share battles with ego, but He fully supports those who surrender outcomes to Him. And from that moment onward, every plan they made was already compromised, because divine protection does not coexist with ego-driven response, and this is why their attacks became increasingly irrational, emotional, and self-destructive, because when they could no longer provoke you into reacting, they began reacting to themselves, exposing insecurities, contradictions, and intentions that had long been hidden, while you, guided by Allah, were being elevated internally, gaining clarity, discernment, and a calm authority that could not be shaken by rumor, pressure, or intimidation. And Allah used this internal elevation to prepare you for a level of responsibility that requires emotional discipline, not impulsive reaction. Because leadership in Allah's sight is not given to those who win arguments, but to those who master their nafs. And what they never realized is that by trying to provoke your ego, they were unknowingly pushing you closer to Allah. Because every moment you resisted responding out of pride was a moment your reliance on Him deepened, your dua became more sincere, and your heart became lighter, freer, and less attached to human validation. And once your ego no longer demanded justice on its own timeline, Allah's justice began moving without obstruction. Because ego rushes, but Allah times, ego exposes prematurely. But Allah reveals perfectly. Ego seeks to be seen as right, but Allah seeks to restore truth. And this is why their defeat did not arrive through confrontation, but through consequence, reversal, and gradual collapse. Because Allah does not merely stop those who wrong His servants, He teaches them through loss what they refuse to learn through conscience. And all of this was sealed the moment you chose Allah over ego, because from that point forward, the battle was no longer between you and them. It was between them and the decree of Allah. And no one wins that war, no matter how long they delay it. And now, as you look back, you may realize that what felt like restraint was actually power, what felt like loss was actually protection, and what felt like surrender was actually the highest form of victory. Because by choosing Allah over ego, you ensured that your hands remained clean, your heart remained intact, and your future remained untouched by the chaos meant to destroy it, proving that the greatest defeat an enemy can suffer is not humiliation at your hands, but collapse under the weight of divine justice after you stepped aside and let Allah take control. Chosen one, reflect deeply on this undeniable truth. The complete and miserable failure of those who opposed you, attacked you relentlessly, and plotted against your rise is the clearest, most undeniable proof that Allah was never absent from your side, that every moment of endurance, every act of restraint, every prayer whispered in secret, and every tear shed in silence was seen, recorded, and honored by the most merciful. And their repeated, prolonged, and utterly ineffective attempts to break you were never a reflection of your weakness, but a testament to the divine shield surrounding you. Because when Allah chooses someone, no amount of plotting, scheming, or darkness can penetrate what He guards. And the very people who believed they could manipulate outcomes, rewrite narratives, or orchestrate your collapse ended up exposing their own limitations, mistakes, and futility while you stood resilient, calm, and protected, not by your own power, but by the infinite strength, wisdom, and planning of Allah. And this is why their failure was not just a momentary setback, but a public, humiliating, and spiritually revealing collapse. Because Allah's protection is not subtle, it often dismantles the foundations of the oppressor in ways so complete that the world cannot ignore it. And while they spent years attempting to harm you, Allah used every single attempt to purify your heart, test your patience, strengthen your faith, and deepen your reliance on Him alone, so that when the consequences finally fell upon them, the outcome was a testament to your endurance, your righteousness, and the truth that no human can overcome what Allah has decreed. And you must understand that their frustration, confusion, and repeated failure were not coincidences or chance, but deliberate signs from Allah to affirm your path, validate your patience, and remind you that nothing you endured was wasted, nothing you suffered was ignored, and nothing you lost could ever diminish what Allah intended for you. And the more they plotted, the more transparent their weakness became, revealing envy, fear, and insecurity that could not withstand the divine protection surrounding you. And while they tried to measure success by control, influence, or manipulation, Allah measured success by your steadfastness, your integrity, and your unwavering trust in Him. And this is why their misery is so complete. It demonstrates that human schemes are powerless against divine will, and the very obstacles they thought could stop you only became instruments of your elevation, refinement, and preparation for what Allah has in store. And now, as you witness the collapse of their plans, the public unmasking of their intentions, and the futility of their years-long efforts, know without a shadow of doubt that Allah was never absent, never unaware, and never slow, because every victory you see now, every moment of peace, every unexpected blessing, and every sign of vindication is proof that He was orchestrating, defending, and positioning you perfectly, and their miserable failure is not only a validation of your endurance, but also a divine testimony to the world, that when Allah is with His chosen ones, no army of envy, no coalition of lies, and no prolonged attack can ever succeed against what He protects. And their repeated collapse confirms that your rise was preordained, your protection was certain, and your path was always under the care of the One who never misses, never fails, and never allows injustice to go unanswered. And this is why you can stand today in absolute confidence, knowing that nothing can take what Allah has decreed for you, nothing can alter your trajectory, and nothing from the schemes of men can ever diminish the divine favor, support, and guidance that has been your constant companion throughout every trial, every attack, and every long night of struggle. Because when Allah is with you, failure for your enemies is inevitable, and your success, protection, and elevation are guaranteed. Chosen one, as you reflect on everything you endured, the years of attacks, the whispered lies, the hidden plots, and the relentless opposition, understand this. Every failure they faced, every plan that collapsed, and every moment you remained steadfast was a clear sign that Allah was never absent from your side. Your patience, your silence, your surrender to Him over ego, and your unwavering trust were never wasted. They were the instruments through which Allah demonstrated His power, justice, and protection. The same people who believed they could destroy you are now witnessing their own collapse, while you rise with clarity, peace, and purpose. Because what Allah ordains for His chosen ones cannot be stopped by envy, plotting, or malice. So hold your head high, continue to trust Him fully, and remember that every trial, every attack, and every obstacle was preparing you for a destiny far greater than you can yet imagine. Stand firm, for Allah's support is your armor, His wisdom your guide, and His decree your ultimate victory. And now the world sees that when Allah is with you, no one can ever prevail against what He has chosen to protect.